Well, it's not just about economics. Granting citizenship to large numbers of low-income immigrants creates new beneficiaries for government redistribution, right? And eventual future voters likely to support even more government spending. In effect, immigration policy becomes a transfer of political power, not just a humanitarian or economic issue. Friedman saw this as a threat to limited government and individual liberty because it shifts the political balance towards more redistribution and bigger government. He would have been against that.
Yeah, that's a side of the debate that doesn't get much attention. It's not just about coming in, but how it changes the political landscape.
Oh, exactly. This idea is not lost on the Democrats. You don't have to bother rigging elections when you could rig the electorate.
America's founders are calling. It's your opportunity to respond. This is the Liberty Brief Podcast with your host, Robert Melso, featuring Dr. Thomas Giordano.
Welcome back to the Liberty Brief Podcast, episode 33, Immigration, Economic Realities, and Social Challenges. I'm your host, Robert Melso, and today we're tackling a subject that is at the heart of American identity, economics and politics. That topic is immigration, and that sparks passionate debate, but our goal is to cut through the noise and get to the facts, the history, and the real-world implications. To help us do that, I'm joined by Dr. Thomas Giordano, author of the book Unalienable, What It Really Means and Why It Matters. Dr. Tom, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Immigration is a subject that touches nearly every American family and community, and it's shaped our country in profound ways. I'm glad we can have a thoughtful look at this today.
Well, I'm glad to have you. So let's start by looking backward. Immigration is often framed as a timeless American value, but the reality is much more complicated. I want to begin with a perspective that's frequently invoked in today's debates. The views of Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman. Dr. Tom, some people claim Friedman was the champion of open borders. Now, he was a ferocious free market advocate, but is that entirely correct?
Well, that's a common misconception, Rob. Dr. Friedman's views were nuanced and depended heavily on the type of government and society in place. You also have to consider that he was primarily focused on economics and only touched on social impacts very indirectly. In a purely libertarian state, one with minimal government and no welfare, he did see open immigration as consistent with liberty and economic opportunity. But he was crystal clear that in a modern welfare state, open borders are a recipe for disaster. He warned that you can't have both a generous welfare system and unlimited immigration because people would come for the benefits, not for the work.
Well, I know I would.
Well, who wouldn't?
So you're saying Friedman's support for open borders was conditional. It depended on the absence of a welfare state.
Exactly. He described several scenarios. In a minimal state, open immigration works. Before the welfare state, like before 1914 in our country, immigrants came for jobs and everybody benefited. But in a welfare state, open borders mean an endless stream of people seeking government support, which is unsustainable. Although he was not with us during the Biden administration, the last administration, judging by his views, he would have been absolutely against government-abetted, unfettered, illegal immigration with monetary benefits waiting the new arrivals. This would have been completely unacceptable to him. That's not just an economic problem. It's a political and social one as well.
All right, let's break down those scenarios in a bit more detail. What did Friedman actually say about the different types of immigration? And how do those ideas fit with today's reality?
Well, Dr. Friedman outlined four key scenarios: open immigration in a libertarian state. Here, the government is almost non existent. So there's no welfare or redistribution. In this world, open immigration is fine. People come to work, and there's no incentive to migrate for government benefits. This was basically how our system was before 1914. We were not looking for people to colonize as much as we were looking for people to settle. It's a different concept altogether. The second one was pre-welfare state immigration. Okay. Back then, immigrants came for jobs, not for handouts. They had to support themselves, and the country benefited from their labor and energy, right? Open immigration into a welfare state. This is where Friedman drew the hard line. He said you can't have both open borders and a welfare state because it creates a magnet for people to come for government support, not just opportunity. The result, he warned, would be a reduction in living standards and a strain on public resources. The fourth is illegal immigration into a welfare state.
Sounds familiar.
Friedman made a paradoxical point here. He argued that illegal immigration can be good only as long as it's illegal, meaning as long as illegal immigrants don't have access to welfare and must work to survive. But if government starts providing benefits to illegal immigrants, the whole logic falls apart. And he would have been completely against that.
Well, it seems to me to be a crucial distinction. So, Friedman's often quoted support for immigration was really about context. He lived in a different time and under a different system than we have today.
Absolutely. His views have to be taken in their proper context. And today, with a large welfare state and many government programs like we see, the risks he warned about are very real. Illegal immigrants are often a net fiscal drain. They receive more in government services than they pay in taxes, especially when they have lower education levels and earnings. Major cities and states are struggling to cover these costs, which is exactly what Friedman predicted would happen in a welfare state with mass immigration, legal or otherwise.
Well, let's talk about the political side. What does it mean when millions of people, many of them low-skilled and illiterate in their own languages, are granted access to government benefits and eventually citizenship?
Well, it's not just about economics. Granting citizenship to large numbers of low-income immigrants creates new beneficiaries for government redistribution, right? And eventual future voters likely to support even more government spending. In effect, immigration policy becomes a transfer of political power, not just a humanitarian or economic issue. Friedman saw this as a threat to limited government and individual liberty because it shifts the political balance towards more redistribution and bigger government. He would have been against that.
Yeah, that's a side of the debate that doesn't get much attention. It's not just about coming in, but how it changes the political landscape.
Oh, exactly. This idea is not lost on the Democrats. You don't have to bother rigging elections when you could rig the electorate. Even they know that non-citizens, especially illegals, have no political rights in our country. They cannot legally cast a vote. They can't hold office or even participate in government. It's not their right. Since they aren't even asked if they are citizens during census taking, their numbers can influence proportionment when determining congressional districts. There is an entire political agenda behind their being here, and it's got nothing to do with humanitarianism. Anyway, until recently, Biden's administration made it easier for illegal immigrants to access government programs, which Friedman would have strongly opposed. Instead of building a wall around welfare, these policies have created a highway to government benefits, which is which is the opposite of what Friedman thought was sustainable.
So there was a free lunch under Biden, you could say.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, before we move on, I want to bring in a personal story that connects you and me to history. When Milton Friedman describes immigration to a non-welfare state, he's describing our grandparents and their arrival in the U.S.
Absolutely, and his own parents' arrival.
Right.
His own parents were immigrants from Eastern Europe.
Yeah, right. And I think we can both remember the stories of the hardships they faced. By the time we got the stories, they were retold as almost comical. Even my last name was changed at Ellis Island.
Yeah.
Grandpop and Great Uncle Tony came to the United States together. And when they left Italy, their last name was Melsa. They had the misfortune of being separated at the island and wound up in two different processing lines.
Yeah.
Grandpop came out with Melso, and Uncle Tony came out with Mel C. So now the family has three different last names.
Yeah.
I know it's a trivial example, but other more serious things happened to them.
Yeah.
I mean, real tragedies. Can you talk about what life was like for, say, Italian immigrants who came through Ellis Island? I mean, since we have more direct firsthand knowledge of that experience.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. But before I do, I'd like to note something Thomas Sowell observed about immigrants. He's done a lot of work on this. We have to recognize the distinction among immigrant groups. Dr. Sowell emphasizes that there is no such thing as an immigrant in general. He believes it is inaccurate and unproductive to discuss immigrants in the abstract. He notes that some immigrant groups have been tremendous assets to America, while others come and go on welfare. In other words, all of the groups from a foreign geographic area arriving at our shores brought unique talents, unique foods, and unique cultural norms that have enriched us all. But this notion is based on conditions that Dr. Friedman outlines. Even differences within the same people immigrating from different areas in the same home country can be magnified. I mean, look at us. We still make the distinction between regional areas of Italy from which we came. Abruzzo, Molise, Campania, Calabria, Puglia, Basilicata, Sicilia, and so on. Even sometimes down to the provinces or the towns. My family was from Chieti. Grandpop's family was from La Provincia di Cosenza. We make these distinctions even today, although we may be losing it today in our generation.
I remember that well. We still identify our own cousins from the part of Italy their families came from. And I'm quick to tease some of them, too, about their heritage.
Yeah. Hey, what are you, Sicily?
Yeah.
Exactly. Sicilian?
Cousin Joe.
Yeah, Cousin Joe. Yeah. Hey, Uncle Abbott's, Uncle Abbott's was from Abruzzo, Uncle Joe. Who else? Uncle Johnny was from Sicily.
Yeah.
He's from Palermo.
Oh, and then we had the Romanos.
Yeah. Romani.
Okay, so it's...
we make the distinction. I mean, we make the distinction. We had on Wilder Street, where Grandma and Grandpop lived, 12th and Dickinson, Wilder. How many families up that street were from the same town in Calabria? From Terranova da Sibari in Provincia di Cosenza. They were all in the same line. There were 3-4 people that all came from the same town. And they all knew each other back in Italy. So,
Right. So, okay, it's misleading to just say immigrants as an abstraction. Right. So let's get back on point. What were the conditions in Italy that triggered the mass immigration?
Well, let me give a little bit of background as to why they came when they came.
I was afraid you were going to do that.
and why they didn't come, why we didn't see a mass immigration earlier, like that of the Irish during the famine in the 1850s.
Yes, well, we discussed their hardships in our podcast on the Corn Laws, I remember. So go on.
Okay. Well, most people, even Americans of Italian descent, think today's Italy is the Italy of our forebears. It's not. The overwhelming number of immigrants was from southern Italy and Sicily, il Mezzogiorno, or l'Italia Meridionale, as they call it here. Basically, what the Romans would have called Magna Graecia, and the Greeks would have called Megalo Hellas, okay? Notions of cultural inheritances of the Rinascimento, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti, Rome, Venice, Italian cuisine, and the like, are all the results of a politically driven, unified identity.
Don't forget Frank Sinatra.
So is the language we speak today.
Don't forget Frank Sinatra.
Sinatra, if I'm not mistaken, they were from Naples. They were Napolitani.
And Dean Martin.
The Italian peninsula, even today, is divided into two distinct cultures, the North and the South. Here, they say I polentoni, the people who eat polenta in the North, and the terroni, the people in the South. So you have to remember what the situation was politically before these people came. In the South, the Regno di Napoli, or the Kingdom of Naples, existed for 800 years. With the French invasion of 1806, Ferdinando and Maria Carolina fled to Palermo in Sicilia, and the kingdom was renamed Il Regno delle Due Sicilie, or the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, under French occupation. Gioacchino Murat, Napoleon's brother-in-law, was installed as the new king. This all crumbles in 1815 with the Treaty of Vienna. The period between 1815 and 1870 is called Il Risorgimento in Italian, or the Resurgence. Now, the reason I mention this history is that with the French occupation, feudalism was officially abolished on paper, but didn't truly go into effect until 1892, some 30 years after the so-called unification of Italy in 1861, and the formation of the Regno d'Italia, or the Kingdom of Italy, under the Savoia monarchy.
So what you're getting at is that under all this political turmoil, the common people living under the feudal system didn't see any changes. It made little difference to them who was in charge.
Well, the flag changed.
Oh, wow.
Official letterheads on government documents changed. Tax stamps changed, but not much else. 90% of the people had no political franchise. 90% were illiterate. 90% had no freedom to move about and were tied in some way to a padrone. They couldn't vote with their feet until the bonds of feudalism were broken. Even if they wanted to, underneath it all, there was no sense of fealty in the South for the royal family, in the Val d'Aosta on the French border. Even the privileged signoria, or the nobility and the aristocracy, viewed the unification as a conquest and colonization. In Italy at the time, the only way for a commoner to improve their life was to own land, property, or enter into the mercantile class. A good majority of these people went to America to work and save money to then return and buy land. So what I mean to say is they went to America looking for work, and they found freedom. No bureaucracy, no city hall, what they call the comune here, to stop you from doing things. No punishment if you went visiting another town or a city without written permission. And the other thing was food. There was food in abundance in America.
So any alternative future in America was better than, say, no future back home. And they were encouraged to come in. We needed the labor.
Yeah.
But they needed a sponsor to be able to come in and stay. Someone or some family that would vouch for them, house them, help them get on their feet. It wasn't that anyone with a pulse could come in.
No. As a matter of fact, there was a charge for entering in the mass immigration too. It was between $8 and $10 per person. And back then, $10 was a half an ounce of gold.
Right.
What's a half an ounce of gold today? It's $3,300 an ounce.
$1,500.
That gives you the buying power of the money that they had to spend to come into the country. Okay, so you look at these millions of people coming in. That represented a huge amount of money going to the federal government. But you've got it between 1892 and 1920. Over 6 million Italians came to the U.S., driven by poverty, political instability, natural disasters, and, those kinds of things. Most were unskilled laborers from rural areas. Others did have skills, though. Masons, farmers, tailors, miners. Their journey was tough. Ellis Island, the Italian immigrant called Ellis Island L'isola delle lacrime, the island of tears, because so many families were separated and deported back to Italy due to ill health or failed literacy tests. 4 million were admitted. About 2 million never got past entry. And those who made it through faced crowded urban tenements, hard labor, and prejudice. But they built strong communities, especially in cities like New York, Boston, and Philly on the East Coast, and played a huge role in building America's infrastructures. They also immigrated en masse, the Sicilians more than anybody else, into New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah. It's striking how much they had to overcome, both in terms of the journey and the reception they got once they got here.
Yes. And as I said, many put up with all of that because they intended to return home after making some money, but a significant number stayed and built new lives. They faced discrimination. Italians were often seen as, undesirables.
Hey.
Yeah, well, hey. Maybe in some sectors we still are. I mean, didn't you hear that go between Stroke and Page? She didn't have anything nice to say about Italians, but she can go screw herself. But we were subjected to intense scrutiny and even violence. But through hard work and perseverance, and the Second World War, they became an integral part of American society. Took a war.
Yeah, often does. Well, let's talk a bit more about the prejudice Italian immigrants faced. What were some of the challenges unique to their experience?
Well, Italians were often stereotyped as criminals right from the get-go, or anarchists, and sometimes faced violence. Like in 1891, 11 Sicilian men in New Orleans were lynched because of the assassination of the chief of police. No one ever mentions that he was running for mayor at the time, and the mayor didn't like him too much. But they blamed the Sicilians, so hundreds of them were arrested, and they went on trial and everything. But in any case, they were lynched with the complicity of the political and police force down there. They were also seen as racially ambiguous. Sometimes they were called the Chinese of Europe. That was supposed to be an insult, and worse than the Negroes. I use the word Negro is because that's what they used back then. And worst of all of that, they were Roman Catholics coming to a Protestant country. Despite these challenges, they organized labor unions. They fought for better conditions. and contributed to key labor movements. Their story is one of resilience and determination. Now, remember, this is our story, okay? This is our Italian story. The Irish, the Eastern European Jews, the Poles, the Russians, the Greeks, and other ethnic groups from Asia all have their own stories and challenges that are on par with or worse than ours. The Irish were treated much worse than we were. Much, much worse.
Well, you know, one thing that stands out is how much earlier immigrants were expected to assimilate. You know, in my father's household, they weren't allowed to speak Italian, even though his parents could barely speak English.
Right.
But how did that process work, and how does it compare to today?
Well, assimilation was essential. Immigrants had to learn English. They had to find work and adapt to the American society. You know, there was no safety net, you know, so necessity drove integration. For us, communities like Little Italy in New York or the 9th Street Italian Market in South Philly, they provided support. The Palumbo family, for example. But over time, most immigrants adopted American customs and values. Being proud of your culture and history as a personal inheritance is a good thing. There's no question about that. But think about it. If your home country was so great, why did you leave? If you were escaping it, why would you want to recreate it here? Today, the welfare state and multiculturalism can actually slow down or even prevent assimilation. And there's less pressure to integrate and more incentives to maintain separate identities.
So you're saying the melting pot worked because people had to blend in to survive and succeed. But let's bring it back to the present. What are the main economic and social challenges of mass illegal immigration today, especially within the context of the welfare state?
Well, obviously, the biggest economic challenge is the cost. You know, many recent immigrants, especially those, you know, with lower education levels, you know, these people use more government services than they pay in taxes. This creates a fiscal burden on cities and states, leading to budget crises and strained public services. You know, socially, rapid demographic change and lack of assimilation can lead to tension and fragmentation, especially when policies encourage group identity over national identity.
Well, we're seeing that play out in Europe, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Tom.
Yes, we are.
I mean, there's places in Europe you can't go there, and it looks nothing like the home country.
Right. Go to London.
And it's
I think the last Englishman that leaves London should take the flag. You know, listen.
Well,
in Germany today, 16% of the population was not born in Germany. That's a hell of a lot of people. I don't even know what the percentages are in France, but I could tell you that it's probably about a third of the people there are not of French descent.
You know, when I go to Germany, I want to meet Germans and eat bratwurst.
Yeah, me too.
I don't want to go for a bowl of spaghetti and meatballs.
No, exactly. Well, there are a lot of Italians who went to Germany for work. You know, we didn't immigrate just to the United States or Canada and Australia. You know, they went into Germany. They went in, you know, after the Second World War. They were part of a war reparation program where Italian citizens were sent to other countries to repay war debts as laborers, you know. But in any case, you know, it's a direct result of policies that prioritize diversity for its own sake, rather than fostering a shared national culture. The result can be divisiveness, regionalism, and the growth of ethnic particularism, which undermines social cohesion. You know?
Right. It's balkanization, in other words.
That's it, balkanization. Right.
And, well, anyway, that's a big shift from our past when the focus was on integration and self-reliance.
Right.
So, there's this popular idea today. I keep hearing it. It's one of those things that you can tell it's being foisted on us. You can tell because it keeps being mentioned over and over and over.
Sure.
Diversity is our strength.
Right.
Diversity is our strength. You hear it. It sounds, and after a while, it sounds a bit like propaganda.
Oh, it is propaganda.
Actually, more than a bit.
Right.
How does Dr. Sowell respond to that?
Well, Dr. Sowell argues that diversity alone isn't the strength. It can divide a country and cause strife, as we've already shown. It's the process of assimilation that makes a country strong. He points out that before the welfare state, immigrants had to integrate and support themselves, which led to a blending of cultures and a stronger society. Today, policies that encourage multiculturalism and group identity weaken the social fabric by discouraging assimilation and creating separate communities. You see, diversity is a strength when it is being driven towards a common goal, okay? But not in and of itself. If diversity was a strength, these people wouldn't be immigrating to the United States. They'd be happy and content where they were.
Yeah, so let me paraphrase what you've just said, because I think I'm getting this now, slow as I am. It's not just about having different cultures, but it's about having these cultures interact and integrate.
Right, exactly. Without integration, diversity can become a source of conflict rather than strength. Sowell warns that large numbers of unassimilated immigrants can become a threat to the system itself, leading to fragmentation and instability. I've seen in historical examples like, the fall of Western Roman Empire and the breakup of Yugoslavia. I witnessed that, it was horrible.
Well, we've had a lot of listener questions about how to balance compassion for immigrants with protecting the country's economy and culture. What's the best way forward? I mean, there's a lot of talk about amnesty and novel paths to citizenship.
Well, there is no need for novel paths to citizenship. They already exist. The legal process has been on the books since we've had a republic. Come here legally and wait your turn. In any case, the balance does have to be sought. Policies need to encourage integration and self-sufficiency, not dependency. We're looking for assets to come to our country, not liabilities. That means focusing on skills, language, and a work ethic, and limiting access to welfare for newcomers. Compassion is important, but so is sustainability for both the immigrants and the country as a whole.
Well, it sounds reasonable, Dr. Tom, but looking ahead, what should they take away from this conversation about immigration?
Well, immigration is about both economics and culture. History shows that successful immigration depends on people coming to work and integrating, not just to receive benefits. The challenge is finding policies that support that goal while protecting the values and resources that make the country attractive in the first place.
Well, Dr. Tom, that's about all the time we have right now. I want to thank you for joining us and helping us to unpack these complex issues. Your insights have always given us a lot to think about.
Well, thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure, especially talking about a little bit of our own immigrant history. Oh, by the way, I would like to clear something up.
I'm not Italian?
No. No, you are not Italian. You're Greek, kid. You're not Italian. You may think you're Italian because your ancestors, immediate ancestors, came from Italy, but you're of Greek descent. You're not of Italian descent. In any case, it's the classification of people under the immigration rules and regulations. People who come to the country are referred to as stock. Okay, these are the immigrants just off the boat. They're stock. Their children are considered stock. Okay? Now, the children of their children are considered first generation. Okay? So we are first generation Italian, Americans of Italian descent. Our parents were not. Our parents were considered stock. They were also subject to deportation, whether they were American citizens or not.
Wow. Well,
okay.
With Trump in office, you never know.
Right. So for anybody who has grandparents that were born, at least one grandparent that was born in a foreign country, they are considered first generation, not second generation. So, your children are second generation. My children are stock because my wife is Italian.
Got it.
So they're American citizens. They're U.S. citizens. So,
well,
I'd like to get that cleared up because many people don't understand the terminology that they say. Well, I'm a first generation because my parents were born in Italy. No. You are still stock. Your children are first generation.
Got it.
And it's the same for any group, not just Italians.
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's it for episode 33 of the Liberty Brief podcast. Thanks for listening. Check out our website for more episodes and join us next time as we tackle another important topic. And as always, take care.
Take care.
You've been listening to the Liberty Brief, based on the book Unalienable, What It Really Means and Why It Matters by Dr. Thomas Giordano. If you want to help spread the word, please subscribe, like, and share using the links below. You can also check out Dr. Giordano's book on Amazon using the links as well.